Well, state water ministers are refusing to back the federal government's inquiry into water sharing arrangements, with one minister saying it misses the real problem and would open a Pandora's box. Now, the federal water minister, David Littleproud, said that the federal government will push on with an inquiry into the century-old water sharing arrangements between the states, even if several states refuse today to cooperate. They sound like one big jolly family, don't they? Joining me to discuss this absolute mess is Carly Marriott from Barooga in New South Wales. Now, she was one of the organisers of the Can the Plan protest that turned up in Canberra a couple of weeks ago. Carly, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
By the sound of it, New South Wales got very cranky, as we expected. Some states agreed that they deserved to get cranky, but not even an agreement on continuing this review. They aren't happy campers, and I think the minister might be lucky that they're still backing the Murray Basin Plan.
Yes, it was a funny day in that we haven't had any clear information come out. I think it's still a bit soon to know exactly what's happened. But what we can see from today's meeting is that the states are still very much in charge. And what we can acknowledge, and what all of the water ministers are acknowledging, is that there are issues. There are environmental issues, there are economic issues, and there are social issues. But they're still not giving the okay to have an independent umpire in Mick Keelty come through and rip the lid off all of these water sharing agreements and arrangements. And that's what we need. And as you said, it would open a Pandora's box. And I think that's exactly what we need to nut out where the fundamental issues are. And there's new science available and there's new evidence available, facts and figures. They need to be included and they need to be considered. This is not a stagnant document set in stone. It needs to be changed and adapted to the environment that it's in.
I can't wait until they find out who's dominating the water permits and who might be the speculators. And, of course, one thing they did agree to today, to find out some of the foreign-owned permits that operate up and down that river system. This might be really interesting to find out.
Absolutely, and that's the reason. It's such a large area and it's such a precious resource. So everyone has something to lose and everyone has something to gain in this. But we need to find out where the weaknesses are. And by giving Keelty these powers, he already has the power to review the compliance and how compliant people are being with their water management. So if they're not meeting the basic objectives of the Water Act and the objectives of the Murray-Darling Basin Authority, well then states or Commonwealth water holders need to be called on it. And if we have to flesh out, your individual ownership status and who's trading water where, then so be it. Because this is taxpayers' money and this is of national interest. This is not something that a few guys up north can just play with and a few guys down south can demand. This is a national emergency and it needs to be addressed with as much gusto as possible.
Yeah, one of the real emergencies as opposed to some of the other subjects that have been called emergencies. Can I just raise this question? It's ironic, really, that the drought has been responsible for actually exposing the lack of water that's gone to farmers and the abundance of water that have gone to environmental flows down south of the Murray-Darling Basin system. And without the drought, we may not have exposed this so early.
That's exactly right. And what you'll find is that a lot of the mainstream media guys are still making a real connection between drought and the man-made drought that we're experiencing here in the Southern Basin. But you're right, the shortage of water and the shortage of inflows into our water storages has just highlighted that there are some really serious underlying issues with the Murray-Darling Basin Plan. And that's why we had a protest in Tocumwal, we had a rally in Albury, and then we convoyed to Canberra, because our communities are trying to scream out. There's not a lot of us out here, but we are trying to get the message across that this issue, this is not a natural drought. This is man-made. It's all policy-driven. And so if at least Canberra's now listening, these water ministers have pressure on them. You media are starting to definitely figure this out.
Yep.
And you're doing us a great service by explaining it to the mainstream guys, to your taxpayers out there, that the government has created this mess, therefore the government can fix this mess. And Littleproud, he needs to keep standing up and he needs to drag these states to the table. We've had the opportunity to get this fixed. So let's push ahead and let's get this fixed. Pause the plan. Do not use the remaining $4.5 billion that have been put aside for this. We need to get that off the table, quarantine it, and we need to get some common sense among these water ministers, because if they're saying no to an independent, multi-jurisdictional review, you've got to ask yourself why.
Exactly. Can I just say on the subject of being educated on the subject, I've had so much feedback from viewers who've said, oh, this is so confusing, can you explain it to us?
Yeah.
I think the best way to explain it has emerged today. That is, the amount of water that's gone in the Australian Bight, the Great Australian Bight, over a 3-month period, so it's all gone to South Australia, could actually service all of regional New South Wales for an entire year. That's how screwed up this plan is.
Yes, that's exactly right. And you think about the people, there's towns running out of water, our food production is at risk here, and we need to think about this long term. This is not a band-aid approach. The one water ministers meeting we had today, it is a step in the right direction, but you need South Australia to have a good hard look at itself, and it was looked after the millennium drought, and it needs to really consider if it wants to play as a team, because it might end up being hung out to dry, and it needs to remember it's at the end of the river. So those states that are in charge of the water storages, you know, let's all come together and let's share this and let's be mature about it, and do not start, you know, pulling and tugging at the plan. We need to pause it and we need to fix this. And I think Mick Keelty is going to do a very sound job, because the communities out here are dying. The environment is dying because of this basin plan, and it all needs to be fixed. So I think we are moving in the right direction, but I think those states, they need to be pulled into line and quickly, because we don't have a lot of time.
Yeah, that's interesting. I also heard what the South Australian Water Minister had to say late this afternoon, and he wasn't keen to play ball with many of the other states, in particular Victoria and New South Wales, and they still want the status quo. That is, you know, hundreds of millions of gigalitres sent down to South Australia for environmental flows. There's no water for any of that. They've got to start moving and being flexible.
That's exactly right. And the Water Minister for South Australia, he was saying, David Spear was saying that there has been some conspiracy theorists come out around the lower lakes and the Coorong. Now, I think when he says conspiracy theorists, he's actually referring to a CSIRO report put together by Professor Gell. It was peer-reviewed, and it shows that this water system that we're keeping full of fresh water was actually naturally an estuarine system. So we need to look at the science that we're basing this huge plan and this huge operation on, and don't dismiss us like we're a small bunch of radicals out in the bush here. This is the majority, and the tide is starting to turn. People know, voters know, and farmers are trying to work with the environment. We have the most invested in the environment out here, and we do not want to see our Murray River used as some sort of superhighway for water to get down to South Australia when they've got a desal plant sitting there they can use, and they are not creating the food that we are creating in this system.
Spot on. You nail it every single time. Carly Marriott, thank you very much for your time.